my question was to them was, you're okay with 180 schoolgirls getting killed as the first salvo in a war towards regime change? And again, to my surprise, they were okay with it.
I'm Borzu Deragahi. This is my podcast. It's called Badlands. You can subscribe at borzu.substack.com. You can also listen or watch at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or on YouTube. Let me introduce you to everyone. This is Michael Isaac Shokrian. He is a Los Angeles attorney, an Iranian American, and a member of the Jewish community in the Iranian diaspora, as well as an author of a novel. It's called American Playground, and it was published last year. Is that correct, Michael?
Yes.
And it's about, we'll get into the book a little later, but it's about growing up as an Iranian American Jewish person in America. And he worked on it. He told me in the pre-interview, he worked on it for years, worked on this novel for years before he published it just last year. Michael, I wanted to talk to you today about this explosive rift in the Iranian American community, just how divided it's become, how toxic it has become. You have people who are, maybe unified on wanting an end or some kind of end or change, radical change in Iran, maybe a dismantling of the Islamic Republic, maybe an evolution of the Islamic Republic to something more palatable. And then, they are all united on that issue, but on the issue of whether the U.S.-Israeli war on Iran is justified, wanted, desirable, very divided. And for people who are not Iranian American, who are not like totally social media savvy, this has become really ugly, and it's created and loss of friendships, people not hanging out with each other, people not speaking to each other. We have this concept in Persian, it's called ghar. It just means basically you stop speaking and stop associating with someone. It could be like a close relative or a close friend. And there's been a lot of that going on over this conflict in the Iranian American community. And I thought Michael, and especially after the pre-interview we had, I thought he would be like just an excellent and articulate and poetic guide to this phenomenon that is, that is maybe a little bit unfamiliar for some non-Iranian American or non-Iranian expat observers or readers or watchers or listeners.
So I have a group of friends that I've been friends with for about 30 years, and I consider them to all be intelligent and educated people. We have a lot of intellectual discussions. We used to meet once a month, called it the Philosophy Club. So we were definitely.
And they're all Iranian Americans, or
they're all Iranian Americans. Yes. We talk about a lot of things from philosophy to politics, and we don't agree on everything all the time, but we were always on the same page until we got to this situation in February. With the war. And I assumed that we were all going to be on the same page on the brutality and the necessity and the agenda behind the first salvos of that war. But to my surprise, two of our group of four were very much in favor of the war. They were very much in favor of regime change in Iran. And apparently that regime change could come about in whatever way it needs to, and so my question was to them was, you're okay with 180 schoolgirls getting killed as the first salvo in a war towards regime change? And again, to my surprise, they were okay with it. They tried to justify it in some ways. For example, they said wars happen. Civilians got killed in World War II. Civilians get killed all the time. And this is what happens with war. And so as long as it brings about the change that we're looking for, we're okay with it. And it went kind of downhill from there, where we started, accusing each other of, there was some name calling going on. I was called a leftist, liberal, radical, and things of that kind of language was exchanged. It hadn't been exchanged like that before. And after a couple of hours of these exchanges, we stopped. the conversation ended kind of abruptly, and I had to walk away from that conversation having to think about those people that I considered to be intelligent and thoughtful people, and also sensitive people, because I consider artists to be just a little bit more sensitive, or towards humanity. So it was disturbing, and it was not the only conversation and they were not the only group. I have found in the weeks since that a lot of clear thinking, intelligent people are somehow considering this to be okay, even though they are aware of the agenda that Trump and Netanyahu might have. They might have their own reasons for starting this war, at the least of it being regime change or the welfare of the Iranian people. But some people in the Iranian community just don't care about that. They are interested in the changing of the regime at any cost.
Why does it seem like we can't even debate? Like the two sides can't even have a civil debate?
At least with my group of friends that I just described to you, we try to keep it. We usually try to keep it pretty civil, and we know that everybody doesn't agree on everything all the time. I was a little taken aback by some of the name calling, and I know that it's more extreme in other circles where people do draw lines. And I think some of it has to do with the fact that Iranian Americans are also Americans, and America is in this era of division. And we are just a microcosm of that divisive culture that has been, sprouting up in this past 8 years. And so it seems like people are very eager to pick a side. It's a binary thing usually, and they seem to take their side, and then they seem to really want to X out the opposite. So a lot of communication or potentials for communication seem to get lost in the heat that I guess it feeds some sort of a thing in people where the heat and the anger kind of feeds something inside you. But I don't know how it got to this point where, some Persians are considered quote unquote Trumpies, and some Persians are not, and now people walk around and use that kind of language, and they know who those Persians are, and they're like, oh yeah, he's a Trumpy. Don't even bring it up. Don't even, and so that's a normal conversation, in social circles, where it's just like, don't bother trying to explain it to them. They don't want to hear it. They're not going to change. Yeah. And I don't know. I think a lot of it has to do, again, with this culture of division that we're all of us Americans have been thrown into, and we're just a part of that.
Yeah, but you're also a part of several other communities. In addition, you're part of the Iranian American community. You're also a member of the Jewish community in the United States, which has its own complexities and own dynamics and so on, and is also, let's be frank, really toxically divided on this issue as well. If you look at the battle between someone like Bernie Sanders on the one hand and the Mark Dubowitzes on the other hand, the guy from the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. So there's a lot of division there as well. Do you find that is part of the is that one dimension of the confusion and so on?
Yeah, I think that a lot of the Iranian Jews have a very visceral dedication to their Judaism and by connection to the state of Israel, and they've always been leaning towards whichever president, whichever party they feel supports Israel the strongest and the most. In this case, in their minds, Donald Trump supports Israel and is a supporter of Israel, and so they throw their support behind that, and they choose not to look at anything else other than that support for Israel. And so in this situation where a lot of them are Iranians and they're Jewish, it's very hard to have a conversation about, well, where's our devotion? Is it to Iran? Is it to Israel? Is it to America? Because we're all in America. It's a hard conversation to have, and a lot of them don't want to have it. A lot of them would just rather say Israel is our country. Israel is the people that we support, and so we're going to support whatever they do. It kind of ends the conversation. It makes it very difficult to have an intelligent debate about the pros and the cons of it, which there are.
Yeah. And, having understood a little bit about your novel, I have a question for you. Maybe it's a little bit of a tough question. But the way you describe that is like, am I Jewish? Am I Iranian? Am I American? You're American. You live in the US. That would be my reaction. You grew up in the US, right, and you benefited from the system here. But I wonder if this is like, and it has to do with your novel, I wonder if this is like a malfunction of the assimilation process in the US. I wonder if there is some kind of, some short circuiting of that assimilation process that fails to bring these people into the, during the pre-interview, we talked a little bit about how you this great observation during the pre-interview that the Iranians now are like Italian Americans in the 1950s.
That's right.
But the thing that struck me was Italian Americans in the 1950s weren't like obsessed about who was the prime minister of Cold War Italy, in the same way that Iranians are like, following this cleric and what's happening inside Iran and so on. And I wonder if there has been a breakdown of the assimilation process for Iranian Americans. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I think so. I think that, breakdown is a word. I don't know if I would use a breakdown. I would use a word more like a stubborn clinging to our mother language and our mother country. I think. I know that from my family never considered themselves American for a very long time. They consider themselves Iranian. My mom does, and my father did. And I think a lot of those Iranians think of themselves as Iranians first. You're right. The difference between the Italians of the 50s and the Iranians of now is that they did embrace their American, the new country. They respected and loved the old country, but they embraced the new country. I don't know about Iranian Americans today. I think that maybe the kids, the much younger ones, consider themselves American, but a lot of my peers and my elders didn't really embrace the American side as easily or as readily. They definitely cling to their history and to their culture and to their ways. And sometimes that's a good thing. But sometimes it does become confusing, because when you start weighing in on who the leaders of Iran are going to be, or who the government of Iran is going to be, first of all, nobody wants a theocracy and nobody wants an oppressive regime. So that's across the board. But as far as how and who is going to take over there, I don't know that what their interest is, because they aren't going to go back to live there. They're not going to become citizens of Iran. They're not going to vote in their elections, whether they're sham elections or not. And also, for all the unclinging of American culture, they're not leaving America. They're going to stay here, and they're going to vote here or not vote here. And so, they have an embrace of their culture and their country, which is understandable. But when it gets into this political turmoil, turmoil that it doesn't really affect them, and they have very little stake in. I don't know. I think it's just it bleeds over from their cultural ties.
Michael, what's wild is that you have people who maybe speak kind of crappy Persian, were born in not just the United States, and we got to expand this little phenomenon here. It goes to London, it goes to Hamburg, It goes to even like Istanbul, the Iranian expat community. It's been there for a long time, although they tend to travel back and forth a little bit more. But you've got these communities, Paris, where I am right now, these Iranian American communities and their kids, who are never in Iran in their whole life, and yet they're showing up at these protests. Again, holding the lion and the lion and the sun flags of the Iranian monarchy, making fools of themselves on TikTok, doing various dances and like little plays that they don't even understand. They're doing these like reenactments of executions that seem a lot like, I hate to say this, they seem a lot like the reenactments of the martyrdom of Hussein that you see in Ashura in Iran. They don't even realize how ingrained they are in the rituals of their own country, their home country. Why is it so sticky? Why is Iran so sticky? That people want to keep the language, they want to keep the politics, they want to keep the rituals. The kids inherit this stickiness. Why do you think?
Yeah. Well, you and I are both Iranian, and I think that on one side, it's very fair to say that it's a great culture, it's a great country. It has great artists, great poets, great food. And there's a lot of reason to embrace Iranian culture and Iranian life, and I get it. And I even spent a lot of time rejecting that when I was trying to be as American as I could be. So as an adult, I appreciate the history, the rich history and culture of Iran that we are all very lucky to be a part of. But what you're describing is something that I think it's a function of a lot of things. One of them being social media is crazy, and everybody wants to dance like a fool in front of a camera and post themselves doing so. And I think that's just insanity beyond this conversation. This is just something that's wrong with the downsides of social media and technology. But I think a lot of it, a bigger part of it, or a smaller part of it, or a part of it, is that a lot of Iranians that are here, a majority of Iranians that are here, I think, came as a result of the revolution. So they left maybe against their own will. And they have a nostalgic concept or idea of what Iran was like when they were still living there under the Shah. And not the kids that you're talking about who were born here, but definitely their parents or their grandparents. And I'm pretty sure their households are not that different from mine, in that their parents and their grandparents probably had a lot of good, fond memories to pass on to them about their time in Iran and about their love for Iran. And so these children and these grandchildren, I'm sure, picked up on that. Yeah. And now that that country is again at the fore of the news and of politics and culture, they are wrapping themselves in a flag that they don't know about. They're wrapping themselves in a culture that they've heard about, but they only know from a second or third generation level. So I see why they're doing it. I don't think I agree with how they're doing it, because I don't know that they're educating themselves on the regime, what the Shah was like, the reason there was a revolution in the first place. There's a lot of stuff that goes into that gets lost in the translation, honestly.
Wrapping yourself in the flag of a country you pretend to love so much that you want another country to bomb it. So let me ask you this: when you you grew up partly in Iran?
I was in Iran until I was almost 7. So for 6.5 years, yes.
And you never went back?
I never went back. My parents went back a couple of times. My older sister went back on a visit. I think my brother is actually, one of my brothers has been there a couple of times as well, but I haven't been back. No.
Yeah. Do you do you have any memories of your childhood in Iran?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I was a child, but we lived in Tehran. We lived in a good society. My parents had friends. They went out a lot. They went to nightclubs. They went to restaurants. They took us out to movies and things of fun things that families do with each other. The streets were vibrant. There was activity on the streets. There was street vendors, and there was it was a vibrant, fun place to be. Now, again, I wasn't aware at that age of the politics of Iran and of the secret police and the people getting disappeared.
Sure. Of course, it's 7.
Yeah, I didn't know about that stuff, but other people who lived there obviously did know about that stuff, and to the point where the citizenry rose up while after we were gone, of course. So
you were not among the what I used to call the 79ers who left Iran in So you left before the revolution, your family?
Yes, we got here in January of 71.
Oh wow!
So when we were here, there was no Iranians, there was no Westwood. I mean, there was Westwood, but there was no Persians in Westwood.
Right.
It was
there was no Tehrangelis.
There was no Tehrangelis. That's right. Which was interesting for us because nobody knew Iran. Nobody knew. Honestly, I remember in 73 or 74, we had been here a few years. Was the first time Iran ever showed up on the news screen, on our TV because of OPEC or because of the Shah was doing something with oil. But before that, Iran was they couldn't even pronounce it, and we called it Persia, and even that was confusing to them. So no, we were 1 in a million back then until 77 when things started to change.
Yeah, and do you remember observing and your family observing the revolution, 77, 78, 79? Was that something that you were watching closely? And were members of your family or members of the community back then pining to go back after the revolution? Did you experience that at all?
Yeah, I think that it was taken for granted that we would all go back at some point. And I remember that the seeds of, or the little sparks of a potential revolution were starting to show themselves in early 77. People had to be quiet. I mean, I remember my mom saying, be careful who you talk to. You don't know who is Savak. You don't know who is part of the revolutionary underground. We had to be careful about talking about it one way or the other.
In Los Angeles?
In Los Angeles, because there were more and more Iranians coming. And some of them my parents knew, and a lot of them my parents didn't know everybody in Iran. So there was a lot of new faces coming, a lot of new names and new faces coming from Iran. And so we had to digest them all because, the community does stick together, and Iranians find Iranians. And I think that's why everybody concentrated in LA and New York, is because once there was a stronghold here, people started, just coming, friends of friends of friends. And so, I did watch it. And I remember that we all, we went on a big family trip to Washington, D.C. when there was a rally there for the Shah. And we were all very excited, and everybody had flags and things of that nature. But that was at the time when the Shah was looking for some support from the U.S. But yeah, those things were happening in front of us in real time, and it was very fascinating to watch.
Now, do you remember like the Iran-Iraq war? Was that something that you observed, that your family was like watching? I mean, maybe you're a little bit too young for that, as I was as well. But that time, the 80s and 90s, and do you remember that was the darkest time in Iranian history, really, I think. People talk now about putting Iran under maximum pressure. That was talk about maximum pressure at that point. But do you remember basically swearing off Iran at that point?
Yes, that's a good way to put it, because I think that by the time the Iran-Iraq war started, we already knew that Iran was not ours, and that we as Jews and maybe as liberal Iranians in general just didn't belong there anymore. It was not just a revolution in theory. It was a successful revolution where they won and they took over the country, and now they're even having a war with another country. So there was no longer a question of, is the Shah going to come back, or is sanity going to come back, or is, this was now their country. And I was a teenager. I was I think about to start UCLA when the Iran-Iraq war was happening.
Yeah.
And to me, I no longer followed it, and I understood what was going on and I was aware of everything, but
Sure.
I didn't have any sort of heart. There was no heart there. There was no connection there anymore. I was like, okay, so this is now an Islamist country, and they're having a war with their neighbor, and let them have at it.
Yeah. What's funny is I did my junior year in the university abroad just after the Iran-Iraq war ended. And I was in Berlin in Germany, and I was like, I'm hearing people talking about like heading back and forth between Berlin and Iran, a few people in the Iranian community in Germany and so on. And I, brought the idea up with my mom. I said, hey, what if I, got my passport renewed and went back to Iran for a visit? And she like freaked out so much. And she like basically called me like a few times. Is like, don't even think about it. Don't even think about it. And the fascination was there. And I remember being interested. And at university, I took like Middle East studies and so on, and became really kind of interested and started really from the time that I was in university, really started delving into the politics of the Middle East and I remember auditing a class in Persian at Columbia University in New York, sprucing up my Persian and so on, and going to graduate school of journalism, always thinking I'm going to go abroad and work as a journalist at some point, and watching really reading the New York Times and the Chicago Tribune and all the other newspapers that had actual foreign bureaus back then, unlike now, covering Iran during the 90s and watching this transformation with the country kind of opening up a little bit and President Khatami coming. And I think maybe that's where the split began between the people who thought, oh, wow, this Khatami is not a bad thing that's happening, versus those in the diaspora who are like, who are you kidding? A mullah is a mullah is a mullah. What do you think? Is that something that you observed at all, or how did you see that time?
I think the way that I was seeing it here, or the reactions that I was witnessing here, were that second part that you just said, which is that it's a theocracy, and you can have a figurehead who presents as a liberal or as a liberator, but
Ayatollah Gorbachev, they call him.
Exactly. Well, I was just going to say that because it was like Gorbachev, and you think that he's going to come, but no. As long as that was a theocracy, if you're not for a theocracy, you're not going to see a liberal figurehead as some sort of a change in that. And I think that there was a lot of fair distrust among the people that were living here of what Iran says and what Iran does, and rightfully so. I mean, they had no reason to think that they were going to be welcomed back, for example. They didn't have any idea that they didn't have any delusions of thinking, okay, Khatami is now the president, and let's go back, and things will be like they were. So the distrust, I don't think ever left.
Continuing. Yeah, but at that time they actually did launch a program of, hey, expats, come on back, come for a visit. They actually were trying to do that under Khatami. And that's when I went back in 2002 and lived there from 2002 to 2007, and continued to visit afterwards until it became impossible, started the hostage taking and so on. But it was at that time, I think, that Iran really became, 2002, 2003, after the Iraq war, Iran really became like higher and higher on the news agenda, and more of a domestic U.S. policy issue, And then you started talking about the nuclear program, and you had these, reports about on the ground from Tehran, from CNN, the foreign bureaus. As from a journalist point of view, foreign bureaus started trying to set up operations in that country. There was a little bit of a rush of multinationals, not necessarily Americans, but like Germans, French, Italians setting up offices. There was like a Benetton, official Benetton there at some point in Tehran, and so on. So I think there was that continued and so on. But even like, and we talked about this during the pre-interview a little bit, even in 2009, when you had the Green Uprising, this massive uprising that was really the biggest threat to the regime so far, because it included the elites there. I think the Iranian American community was still kind of unified, or at least not as toxic. You had the monarchists, you had the leftists, and so on.
Yeah.
But it wasn't like screaming matches. I mean, people were still family and stuff.
I think that that 2009 era united the Iranian Americans, at least in Los Angeles. I think they all saw that as a piece of hope, that things were going to change and things were going to ease up, and maybe they could actually change that theocracy from the ground up. I think they were. I don't know that there was any conflict there among the Iranians themselves. I think most of them were for that uprising and for that ground up approach to things. Again, I really think that this toxicity has a lot to do with our current government here and the culture that they've been cultivating for the past 8 years, because it helps. Divide and conquer is a cliche, but it's very true. And so we've just gotten into this space where we can't debate and disagree. I don't think anybody thought that in 2009, when it was happening from internally and organically from the ground up, as far as I know, anybody thought that bombs needed to be dropped to make the change that everybody wants. And and I think, honestly, 6 months ago, if you had asked an Iranian, would it be okay to bomb Iran in order to get regime change? I don't know that a lot of them would have said yes. Yeah. But I think that once it happened, this idea that, okay, maybe they're really going to go and, decapitate this thing and, make it happen. And I think that, it's like fool's gold. You kind of like, you want to believe it. And so you do believe it. And then the toxicity that you're mentioning doesn't let you back up from that. It doesn't let you go, you know what, maybe this wasn't the right way. Maybe this wasn't the right approach. Maybe you can't change a regime through bombs from the air.
You know what's kind of interesting, though? There's no Fox News in Canada. There's no New York Post or huge like pro-war lobby in France or Germany. Maybe a little bit in the UK, but you don't have the same dynamics as you have in the US. Yet you still have that same division. I wonder if if this is the Iran international effect. The social media effect, because it's the virus, such as it is. And I'm going to be frank here. And, if someone's listening and you're offended, write a comment. I think the toxicity is coming mostly from the other side. Man, I'll engage with monarchists. I've had a podcast where I talked to some of these people, and we interviewed I interviewed him. He asked me questions, and I try my hardest. I feel like the venom is coming from their side more than me. If you disagree, leave a comment. Welcome to talk to me as well. It seems like this virus has gone universal.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you on that, because I'm not going to name names, but I have a big family. I have a lot of uncles and aunts and cousins and whatnot, and we used to have debates. During the Reagan era, we used to have debates during the Bush era, and they were sometimes heated, but they were debates. But now I hear them repeating lines that I know came from Fox News. I mean, they repeat theories that I know didn't come from their heads, because I know who they are. I know where they were educated. I know who they hang out with. So there's no way when I hear one of my uncles say something,
Can you give an example of what they say?
a certain phraseology that they use. I'm like, that didn't come from you. I know that didn't come from you. But they watch it. You go to their houses. It's on. It's just on all the time, and it seeps into your thinking, and it seeps into your philosophy or your thought process, and you're just regurgitating those lines, and then you're believing them. So, I mean, I love you, uncle, but I can see that they are being influenced by that media. It's there all the time.
I wonder why it's gone. I wonder why it has spilled out across the borders. And Michael, let me tell you something. Even I don't know how it is right this second, maybe less so, but even up until a few months ago, even inside Iran, you had this toxicity. Perhaps as a result, you had this, with the monarchists and their attitude towards those who were against the war, because you had pro-war, and there still are many people inside Iran, maybe less at this point, who were in favor of the war, who wanted the Americans and the Israelis to punish the regime in Tehran, and especially after the violent crackdown of January 8th and 9th, in which the regime and its enforcers killed somewhere like, the regime says 3,000 people, a credible human rights organization says 7,000 people. Some people without much evidence say it's many more times than that. In any case, it was a brutal crackdown, and it created a lot of anger. There was a certain weakness on the part of the regime because it had lost a lot of popular legitimacy, and there were people in the country who were in favor of the war, and were as equally as much jerks as the ones who are in the diaspora. But I'm just curious. I wonder how this spread. It doesn't seem like a uniquely American phenomena. It seems like a uniquely Iranian diaspora phenomena. What do you think of? I mean, how do you? And I'll speak a little bit about this later if it's appropriate. But how do you feel about the idea of a foreign country bombing Iran? How do you? How does that make you feel? How does that make you react? The idea of that happening.
Well, I mean, I followed this very closely as soon as it happened. I didn't shed any tears when Khamenei was killed, even though he was an old man and probably would have died off anyway. It bothered me that civilian infrastructure was getting targeted, and it doesn't sit right with me that an ancient civilization that survived so much and thrived through so much and has so much to offer the planet was being indiscriminately destroyed by somebody whose agenda I don't trust and whose competence I don't trust. So I remember in the 90s that the United Nations put together a corps, a military corps, and they went into Eastern Europe, and they took over because there was ethnic cleansing going on. I think Bosnia or Herzegovina, or
Yugoslavia, the crack up of former Yugoslavia.
Yeah. And I remember that was an international affair, that everybody recognized the problem, and everybody recognized that you have to go in there and use some military force, not all exclusively, but get some military force in there to restore some order, take these guys to The Hague, have them, face justice. I saw that happening, and it was very warming to me that, the justice system, the international justice system, does have levers and it does work. And I really thought that that's what should be happening in Iran. When word came out that there was protesters being killed by the government, I thought, well, this has to be a UN thing. This has to be something where we all get together and we all have a Supreme Commander of the United Nations, to come in there and guide us and to fix, or at least stabilize the place. I didn't want somebody who is avoiding, rape allegations, whose popularity
in the
is
Epstein files.
Yeah, because I remember that 2 or 3 days before the bombing, there was news that had come out that they had redacted some documents about this teenager who had accused Mr. Trump of rape. and sexual assault, and 3 days after that, we're bombing a country. And so it's hard not to make that connection and think, okay, well, he was holding that in his back pocket and waiting for a moment. So to me, it was regime change would have been nice if done properly, if done the right way, if done either through an internal uprising or through the United Nations or some sort of a coalition. But this, you could just tell it was going to be a mess because the person who was heading it is a mess himself, and he has an agenda. So it was hard to watch that. It was hard to watch our country or our old country getting bombed in a sloppy way. Our heritage and our culture getting bombed and obliterated in a sloppy way by an incompetent person for the wrong reasons, and who is not. It was clear the results were not going to come about because that's not. He doesn't care about the Iranian people, and as you can see, I mean, here we are, 6 weeks later, and I don't think he's accomplished any of the stated goals.
I guess I wanted to ask you a little bit more about what this conflict and this stress and this trauma, what does it cost you? And what do you think it's cost the Iranian American community in general? There's been a fraying of relations. There's been a lot of suspicion, a lot of accusation. Traitor, you are a traitor. You're a Vatan Furush. You sold out your country. And then worse insults that I get on social media having to do with my mother's private parts often. So I don't understand that. And there's all sorts of toxicity. But just personally, have you lost friends over this?
I have not lost friends, but I have lost some confidence in some friends, and there are definitely frayed relationships right now that are directly resulted from this. There are people that I avoid. There are people that I have unfollowed, as we say, because I just don't want to hear that stuff from them, because I just don't believe it, and I can't believe they believe it. So yeah, the thing is that the problem with toxicity is its lingering effects, because I don't know if I'll ever have the same relationship with some of those people. I know with the others, for example, that group of friends that I started this conversation with, I love those guys. I know they love me. We're going to have disagreements. And I know that when this is all over, we will break bread again. But some of the people that I don't know as well, and I'm not as friendly with, I don't consider them anymore to be somebody that I want to hang out with, because honestly, you show a certain side of yourself, and it's like, I don't know if I can see past all of that anymore. And it's a shame, because everybody, I think, by default is a good person, and you always give them the benefit of the doubt. But when you take certain positions, if you think that it's okay to support somebody that I think is completely incompetent and corrupt, because that person supports your personal agenda, then I feel like, well, then you're not really a citizen of anything other than your own country. You're a member of a country of one, and as long as that president satisfies your personal needs, you're okay with anything he does. And I can't get behind that. So to me, there are people that have shown themselves to be in that way, and I feel like, thank you for showing me, I guess.
Yeah. On the first day of the war, the Americans bombed a school with 180 children in it. It turned out later they used a special weapon that hit a playground, or a sports facility in which children were playing, including a group of girls playing volleyball and some other kids. They hit steel plants, as you noted. They hit energy facilities. There were cultural sites hit, and so on. As the war progressed, did you notice any of your friends or family changing their views? Did you detect that?
Yeah, I did. I mean, I definitely on the first weekend of the war had a separate text exchange with my siblings and my cousins, and a couple of us were on what I think is the right side, and a couple of them were what I think on the wrong side. And it was respectful, and it was it was the disagreement that was philosophical and political, but no name calling or anything like that. I was surprised at their positions. Now, 3 weeks later or 4 weeks later, we revisited it, and I know at least my sister saw things differently and saw things more clearly, I think. And I appreciated that. I appreciated that she had the the guts and the courage to say that, because most people, they just cling to that position even after the fact. But I mean, to me, it's hard to look at it as the us and them, or left and right, or right and wrong thing, because to me it's very clear that whatever happens in Iran should be happening in Iran, and we should be here to help or to aid or to do whatever. But to bomb it indiscriminately in order to distract from something else that's happening here, that's so see-through. Anybody should be able to see through that and not support that, because when you're not starting from a good place, you're not going to end up in a good place. That's what I think.
Michael, I also wonder, I appreciate your grace in accepting your sister's turn. So many Persians are very bitter and spiteful about that kind of thing. But I wonder if, okay, here's a thought. Okay, the chauvinism of thinking that I have a right to push and influence events in a very controversial way in this country that's far, far away is a version of American chauvinism. It's like, the kind of, it's mocked in the South Park movie, America, fuck yeah. Remember that attitude is like, it's like Iran, fuck yeah. And taking on that chauvinism, that they're basically adopting a version of that chauvinism, and using that, because in a way, I'm like, what right do you have as someone who does not live in Iran, has never been in Iran, to basically serve as part of an influence operation to bomb this other country? Maybe if it was, it just seems like the height of American arrogance in a way.
Yeah, I see that, and I think that's pretty accurate, in a lot of ways, because like we talked about before, the Iranian Americans that are here are not going back to Iran. They're not going to give up their livelihoods and their successes and their kids and their grandkids or whoever to go back to a country that they may or may not be familiar with anymore. And so I see, I don't get, other than, like I said, nostalgia. I don't get why they drape themselves in that flag of, we were going to make Iran right again, make Iran great again, or whatever Reza Pahlavi said recently about that. It's hard to not look at that and just think, what, they're just posers, or I don't know what the word is. They're just playing this game here. They don't have a stake in it, and they're not being affected by it, really.
They're acting out in a weird way, and I wonder if that acting out is in a way like it's an attempt to assimilate, by emulating certain traits of the master culture. The America fuck yeah, it just came to me right now that this is what they're doing in a way. It's a result of the short circuit in the assimilation process, because it's interesting, because you and I are both like, I feel comfortable being Iranian, I feel comfortable being American. I don't have a problem with that. I feel comfortable in Tehran, I feel comfortable in Paris, I feel comfortable, like, culturally, maybe not psychologically, I feel comfortable in my own skin, and I don't have any kind of qualms about it. I have like Persian miniatures and PJ Harvey posters, and it's all cool and it kind of all blends together. I wonder if the people who were forced to come, unlike us, 79 and so on, they came here as kind of exiles more than immigrants, or
Yes.
expats in the case of me living in Paris and Istanbul. And it's a different process of assimilation. There's always this longing. And I won't ask you to comment on this mealy mouthed crap anymore. What I was getting at was I was trying to transition it over to your book,
Uh,
which is called the American Playground, and apparently it's a book about the process. Could you bring it over to show it to the audience?
yes,
I see it behind there.
it's
Yeah,
here.
yeah,
There
and
it
it was
is.
published last year, correct?
Yes, published last year.
Yeah, and
I'm very
it's about someone trying to assimilate from a foreign
Yeah,
culture, trying to.
it's basically a fictionalized version of my experience of me and my family when we moved here in 1970 to to Los Angeles, and just the difficulty and the challenges, of learning the language, learning the culture, learning the rules. It's called American Playground because most of the novel takes place on the playground at school, but
Hmm.
also because of the playground, I see it as a microcosm of what it's like to be in America, where there's a hierarchy. There are cool kids and not so cool kids. There are teachers that tell you what to do, and there are rules, and there are written rules and unwritten rules, and you kind of have to spend your time, your 4 or 5 years that you go to that school, just navigating and negotiating those written rules and unwritten rules, and cliques, and the groups that you want to be with versus the groups that you get thrown in with, the friends that you make that you try to reject but who end up being your actual friends, versus the friends that you want to make who you think are the cool kids, and their rejections and how you deal with that, and which is kind of what everybody goes through. I thought it was interesting to have it be encapsulated and as a metaphor on a playground with a bunch of different kids, all Americans, in their own way, and all trying to find their own voice. But this family gets thrown into that. And so the mom has her challenges. The father has his challenges. He goes through some
Wow.
changes. And the two boys, navigate their way on the concrete of the playground.
Oh wow, interesting. And you tell me, how long did it take you to put this novel together for any of the aspiring writers who reside on Substack? So many of them,
Well,
from inception, from conceptual inception to final draft.
I
How
would
long did
say
it take?
from writing it to finishing the first draft, it was I would say 6 to 8 months. Um, uh, but as every writer knows, it's the rewriting that's the real hard
Hmm.
part, and the rewriting of it took 5 years. It took a
Wow.
long time to tear it apart, put it back together again, work with an editor, work solo. Find the problems, try to solve those problems in the book from a structural standpoint, from a thematic standpoint, from a character standpoint, all with the goal of reaching an end that I thought was the perfect ending, and that I thought had to be an earned ending, which meant a lot of exploration for the main character, which means the writer has to really get in there and figure things out. So anybody that wants to be a writer, or anybody that is a writer, knows that it's the rewriting that's the real challenge. The
Yeah.
writing is the fun part. The rewriting is.
And you did all of this while overseeing a successful law practice in Los Angeles, which is not exactly an uncompetitive environment for
Yes.
lawyers. As I was joking during the pre-interview, you can throw a quarter up in the air in West LA and it'll land either, odds are it'll land on the head of a lawyer or a shrink. So you managed to, you did this while you wrote this book while you were working. How did you manage that time?
It was time management. That's what it was. I mean, there was a lot of time there before I started working in earnest on the book, where I was really struggling to meet my passion for writing, which has been with me since I was 17, and to square that with my obligations to my wife and my children and my family. And so I think, not to get nerdy about it, but I read this quote from John Updike after he died about 10 or 12 years ago about his routine. And I thought, okay, I can use that kind of a routine where it's like, a block of time every morning is dedicated to my writing. I can take on clients, after 10:30 in the morning or 11 in the morning and work through the end of the day, but I can save 7 to 11 or 7 to 10 just for my writing. And you'd be surprised, once you do that time management thing and you know that you have 3 hours to get as much done as you can, you concentrate and you focus and you get it done and you feel good about yourself. Then you go and you do the law work and you feel good about doing that because you've done your writing. Then you can spend a couple hours in the late evening working on the magazine and getting the magazine ready to go. It sounds.
Oh, you run I forgot about that. You run a literary magazine as well.
Yes. Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about that.
That is it's a quarterly. It comes out for every season, 4 times a year. It's all digital for now. It's for poets, story writers, artists, photographers, essayists. It's been around since 2017. It is all volunteer, all free, all
Cool.
And it really has some very, very talented unknowns and knowns from everywhere, from Australia, from Asia, from Europe, from America, from the deeper parts of America. Good writers, good artists are everywhere. They all need a platform. We all need a platform. And so I made this magazine thinking that I was going to platform my own work on it when I first started out. But, with so many fantastic submissions that I get regularly, I don't even think about my own work being in there anymore because there's so many great artists that get to populate the pages. So fun.
Great. Thank you. What's it called? It's called
The Thieving Magpie. And
Thieving Magpie. Great. Yeah. Excellent. And your book is available on Amazon?
Book is on Amazon, at Barnes & Noble, bookshop.org, some bookstores in New York and in LA. There might be a bookstore in Paris, actually, that just started carrying it. I'm not sure yet.
I'll pick it up when I go to Chicago this summer. Michael Isaac Shokrian, thank you so much for joining my podcast. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. And it was a lot of fun. The pre-interview was a lot of fun, and the interview was a lot of fun too. Thank you.
I'm Borzu Deragahi. This is the Badlands podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Please subscribe at borzu.substack.com. But you can also watch or listen on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or Spotify.